welcome, welcome. So excited to have you on the call with us today. I am super, super thrilled to be chatting with Martha Delhany, Chief People Officer at Commvault, in our latest edition of How We Tackle People Stuff at Athena. Martha, I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Right.
We love, love, love highlighting our incredible customers, learning from their experiences, and sharing their stories with our wider community. And so, with that said, I'd love to actually kick things over to you and have you just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Melanie, and I'm excited to be here. I am a mom of and a wife. I have three fabulous children, 23 and 25 and 16. I've been the head of people here at Commvault since March 3rd of 2020. So that was an interesting time to start and kick that off. And it's been the last couple of years of the year of the head of people. And I'd say that it's been some strategic, but mostly clean up aisle five and learning and evolving as we're moving along. And I'm just so excited to be here and talk about belonging and lifting our vaulters up around the globe.
I really love how you framed that because I think it gives a little bit of grace and empathy for everybody in people positions who have just been feeling over the past few years like they're playing catch up. It's been great skill building, right? Because we're learning really in times of adversity how to adapt, how to change, how to think more innovatively. But yes, it has sometimes felt just like a little bit overwhelming, especially with personal life things coming in together with the pandemic, all these things. So thank you, Martha. I would love to hear a little bit more about Commvault, especially for anyone in the audience who maybe isn't as familiar with Commvault. Well, tell us about your company. What do you all do?
Sure. First of all, we're an amazing company of about 3,000 employees globally. And we do one thing. We protect our customers' data in, gosh, a pretty difficult world. And we do that through securing data and through making sure we can recover data, not if, but when there's a ransom attack. So cyber resilience is incredibly important. And if you think about the concept of data fueling that fourth industrial revolution, that it's fueling every single customer, regardless of whether you are a hardware company to a big bank to a fast food delivery mechanism. Data is key and king in, or queen to really fueling growth. And you can imagine if that data is compromised in some way. Well, Commvault comes in and we make sure that we secure that data and that if or when there is a cyber attack, and gosh, we've heard an awful lot about attacks from that perspective, that you can recover your data quickly and get back to work. So that's what we do. That's why we have work, and we're really proud of our hundreds of thousands of customers who have trusted us with their data.
I love that. Not gonna lie, at Athena, we just finished our current round of we do cybersecurity training once a year. Obviously, we have lots of customers. We want to make sure we're being very thoughtful and mindful around cybersecurity. And wow, some of the stats are horrifying. They really are. So you all are doing a great thing. Much needed.
Yeah, Melanie, it's really interesting. We've just launched a really interesting experiential training called Minutes to Meltdown. And it starts, Melanie, with somebody in a workplace who innocently is fished with a PH, and gives the wrong thing out, and then it threads it all the way through to that cyber attack. And then what happens, and then when you're thinking about, do you negotiate from a ransomware perspective? But if you've watched the morning show, which is kind of an interesting play, especially in the space that you all work in, I was most interested in the third season when they actually have a cyber breach and a lot of emails that should not have were not meant for public consumption became public, and what happened from a corresponding business. Now, whether those emails were sent or why they were sent becomes an issue around DE&I and belonging and where people have biases. but it's even more interesting of, gosh, what happens when it does become public and those things can become weaponized, if you will.
What a great season, by the way. I watched it and upset, like literally can't wait for season 4. Um, Martha, I'm so excited that today we're going to be having a chance to really dig into this topic of DEI. I know that it is a very top priority for you all at Commvault, and so I'd love to get your perspective on a couple of things with perspective to DEI before we drill in deep. At a high level, I'm curious to know, why is DEI such a priority? What is the role of HR in driving DEI initiatives in the workplace? And from Commvault perspective, what are your DEI goals as of right now?
Sure. First of all, I think it's about creating a space and an environment where everybody can come and be their full selves and have the optionality to just live their best life without being judged or questioned. That doesn't mean we don't all work hard and lean into challenges and have challenging conversations, but we all come to the company with our own experiences, and whether they create biases or not biases, the reality of it is that we're a series of our lived experiences. And the reason why this is so important is that across the globe, there's lots of things going on from a social perspective, from an environmental perspective, and from a people perspective. And if those things can become distracting, and burdensome and scary, frankly, from an employee perspective. And so what we found is that by courageously moving forward and having conversations and not shying away from educating or creating space for people to ask questions that they may have, we've actually seen that that's created some stronger connection across the organization and having people raise issues or concerns. And it's from a place of wanting to be understood, and to feel comfortable in our own skin and to really be able to come forth and do our very, very best work. So that's why this concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is so important around the globe.
Okay, I have to dig in. I have to dig in because Alana, who's our CSM that I know you and she have had some really great conversations, she had mentioned that you all had talked about this thing called, to your point, courageous conversations at work. And she mentioned as well that you all are leveraging Athena nudges to help as part of this. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about, can you please, for anyone in the audience who's maybe like, oh, what is this? Walk us through what courageous conversations are at your company and how you are leveraging Athena nudges, training nudges to help empower these.
Sure. First of all, Courageous Conversations is simply a video platform that we're created where there's events that are topical and talk about things that matter and talk about things that need to have a conversation. I'll give you an example, and this is when and I love the interlock across several employee resource groups, and this was open to up to all vaulters around the globe. We had a courageous conversations around an employee who is part of our Valor resource group, which is our military resource group. He's a Marine, and he really wanted to talk through. He has a child who is questioning their sexuality. And this was an interlock with our LGBTQ plus or PRISM employee resource group. And he wanted to talk about that journey that he's had and talk authentically about it. First, he had questions and didn't understand. And then his learning and his appetite for being open to conversations that are uncomfortable really brought his family together, especially with his military background, where he felt that there was lack of understanding from where he had his original upbringing was. So he challenged, and we had this courageous conversations, and then we included our caregiver resource group, and the caregiver resource group was created during the pandemic was happening is so many people were dealing with childcare, elder care, um, all kinds of things at home. And how do you, and then we're all working remotely. How do you balance that? So the Courageous Conversations platform is bringing these things together, having a courageous conversation for a dad to actually say, here's my experience at home. I'm really proud of my incredible child. And also, oh, by the way, I have evolved over time, and let me tell you my journey. And then we had the PRISM Employee Resource Group just having a conversation around, well, what is it like when you had to talk to your family members? What's happened is that that's opened up an entire conversation to the things going at home with a parent that perhaps is feeling and struggling with these same challenges. That to me is a courageous conversation. When you come forth with a need, you're vulnerable, because the only way you can have courage is to be a bit vulnerable, I believe, thanks to Brene Brown teaching me that. And then to be able to move forward in an authentic, non-pandering way and just say, "Hey, this is one point of view from a conversation." What you can do with Athena, and the reason why nudging is so cool, is it's in the flow of work. And, sure, we can all check a box from a compliance perspective, but that box is simply checked. Changing a behavior, changing a perspective, or opening up somebody's thought perspective is not about getting trained, but it's really shifting the way we're thinking. And what I believe and I've seen is that the nudges, the ability to a 5 minute snack, if you will, is a much more effective way to go, huh, I never thought about things that way. And so if you combine certain aspects, and if you truly have an aspiration to shift the environment to an inclusive or belonging environment, you shift from making sure everybody has been compliant with an experience or training to, is the conversation shifting? Is the leadership messaging? Are we challenging ourselves to perhaps think in a more open way? And our behavior shifting? And frankly, does that help you propel growth? Because if people feel comfortable, I believe if people feel comfortable in their own skin, they're actually better able to produce. So that's that combination. The nudges are interesting because if you think about snacking versus the end of flow of work, and you actually aspire to have training change a future behavior as opposed to protect you from something that may or may not happen, which I believe Athena does. To me, if that's the aspiration, it's a much more effective way to, shift behavior. And we
I
all have behavior to shift.
We definitely do. That is something that I hope that most people have come to a place of acknowledging at this point. We all have some unconscious bias. We all have opportunities to improve, and we all have opportunities to learn from each other. Which is, I think, can be really freeing to just own. I really love the examples that you highlighted, in particular this notion of intersectionality and leveraging all these different moving pieces for the betterment of the whole. And I love the idea of leveraging pre-existing things and almost repurposing in a way. And I'll give an example, like with Athena. Yes, we have some specific nudges, like there's a pride nudge, there's a, performance review nudge, there's a pregnancy nudge. There are all these really topical, bite-sized, 3 minute, 4 minute trainings that you can just put out there to sort of kick off or initiate a discussion. But the reason why in particular, this stands out to me is, I think, especially in an economy like the one that we are currently in, I think oftentimes there can be some challenges where there are sort of two things happening. One, sometimes DEI is almost like treated as a silo. So there's like the rest of the company and how it's run, and then, oh, there's this one DEI team and they do some separate initiatives that have nothing to do with like the rest of it, like performance reviews, so on and so forth. And then also there is, for example, like compliance training, right? We have compliance training, and that's for checking the box. That has nothing to do with our DEI initiatives. And what I really like about what you've talked about is, no, no, no. we already have to do compliance trainings. Why not leverage and repurpose those so that, yes, we are checking the box and also we're maximizing the value that we're getting out of this. We are also weaving in our DEI initiatives. I'm curious to know, how did that idea come to mind for you all? And are there other ways, especially if there's anyone on the call here who's listening in and they're struggling to get budget or buy-in for DEI initiatives, are there any other ways that you can think of for people to make sure that they are really leveraging and maximizing the tools that are already in place for them as a company, as a part of driving forward DEI initiatives?
Sure, it's a great question, and it's the holy grail, of certain things, and we're just this is nascent, and candidly, I've not seen this math prove out. What we have done, though, is that we have continued to, have a pulse employee opinion or employee survey. We do not do a 70 question survey once every 18 months. One, I just hire too many people from that perspective. And, the chances of somebody having a really bad day or a really good day, that one time, I just don't think that that's an effective way to really understand sentiment. It's not what we do with our customers, and it's not what I'm going to do with my primary customer, that's our employees. So what we do is we pulse 5 to 7 questions. And by the way, by the time somebody's answered 7 questions, they're distracted. It's unfortunately the new world. So I think to have people answer, 5 to 7 questions, our participation rate's much higher, and there's a pulse from that perspective. So we have started to ask 2 questions that are consistent. One is the would you recommend Commvault, the classic net promoter score, and the second is do you trust? We introduced the concept of trust, and the word trust is I think a very big word, and word that is um is something that's far more meaningful than asking sort of a bureaucratic question around um uh uh I guess work environment. It's like, no, do you trust? Do you trust your manager to care for you, right? And when you have those 2 questions, you can actually start measuring and monitoring whether you're staying the same, going up or down. You can see the work groups. You can actually pair that with some groups, let's face it, are really good at reinforcing the use of nudges and things like that. And some groups don't reinforce this as well. I'm not a big one to make things mandatory, because when you make it mandatory, you don't get as effective. But nevertheless, so my dream, it's early days, is to show that net promoter score or the trust score um, is moving in the right direction. And I think my thesis is that those teams that are holistically using the tools that we have, and this would be one of those tools, have a propensity to have a higher score. Now, does that generate into revenue and things like that? Certainly, that would be the super holy grail. But even if I could get those pieces, then you just have to think that an engaged workforce is more productive than that of a non-engaged workforce. That's one way of building a very simple business case. I will tell you this, it's the love language of the CFO and the CEO is to speak, especially in a technology company, in a red light green or a data. So you're just at least stepping into that conversation to say, look, if I move this leading indicator 1 or 2 basis points, I'm going to assume it's worth this. That's why you want to make this kind of investment. That's essentially how it has from that perspective. The last is what I really like about Athena is uh, there's a bit of a cachet when when you go through and you experience the nudges. I mean, they're not your normal nudge, if you will. It's not like your mama's, it's not your grandma's DE&I training, or that's probably the wrong thing to say, but don't edit it because it's there you go. And there's something, if you're trying to attract the next generation of talent, and you have that experiential thing, it's there's a cool factor to that I think is sometimes overlooked as a way of a long-term engagement perspective.
Okay. So this is a really fascinating topic for me in particular. I would love to dig in here just a little bit deeper. I know, and I'm aware that over the past few years, to your point, right, where it's sort of like, this is not the traditional type of training, right? It's not what employees are expecting. And before I jump in, I'll say, I mean, let's put it out there, right? If you even think about like harassment prevention training, people like the first thing that comes to people's mind is something that was filmed in the 80s, maybe the 90s. It's going to be really antiquated examples, like make sure that you don't, put your hand on someone's butt. Like, yes, we know that, right? It doesn't address these gray area relevant, like, oh, someone slapped me this thing and it felt off, and they were asking about my weekend and in a way that felt uncomfortable, right? And so my question to you is, over the past few years, I have seen companies recognizing and paying attention to the fact that in their DEI initiatives, it's not just about what they're doing internally, but what they're doing as a company, right? So, what vendors are you partnering with? What initiatives do you have for your customers? How are you thinking inclusively about, branding your product, that sort of thing? I'm curious to know for anyone out there who is listening in and thinking about, wait, what? I've never heard this before. How do I think about DEI when it comes to thinking about which vendors I partner with, for example? You talked about Athena quite a bit, which is very exciting for us, obviously. But I'm curious to know in general, it doesn't have to be Athena specific. What are the things that you recommend people teams think about in terms of choosing which vendors to partner with?
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt that Athena is run, and has a female founder and female CEO and chief strategy officer and a founder from that perspective. I think so the classical piece is to look at Wimby spend. But the other piece is just to take a look at their footprint. Either on the web or other areas and see if because it's amazing to still even see in some advertising that's just lacks the inclusivity that is truly a representative of their customers. Now, in our tech space, we're going to show more things like, clouds. And, clouds are pretty cloudy and they're not like a gender perspective. There's not fewer people in our piece, but it's that kind of thing that are the two areas that I would consider. I mean, the other piece that we're seeing probably is less on the DE&I, but it's certainly more on the environmental part, which is around, we've built in a very proactive way, our solution talking about, the carbon footprint that's left from an environmental perspective. And when people choose, we actually added a carbon calculator in our product set. You don't pay for it, but what that allows people to do in their product set is it allows customers to be able to show how they are reducing their own carbon footprint with data housing and things like that. The reason that's important is that from an ESG perspective, it's that a company should want to leave their society and their environment and their communities better than they got it. And Commvault helps an employee to do that, or helps a customer do that. That's another way to think it through, but it's got to be authentic. To me, there's nothing worse than a sort of check the box. And the reason this was kind of cool is that it's embedded in our product. From a DE&I perspective, you certainly can look at policies and practices and governance models that other companies do. But candidly, a lot of those things can be very check the boxy. And I'm not as enamored from that perspective. I'm more interested in actually the inherent built into the product suite. That's how we've done this more from an environmental perspective.
I love that. Super, super helpful. Martha, as we begin to wrap, I would love to make sure that we leave the audience with a couple of quick tips from Martha specifically. I'm curious in particular if you have any tips that you would love to leave the audience with, in with regard to anything at all. But I'll throw a couple of things to help throw out ideas that stood out to me, which is I really loved your point about making sure that when you're talking to CEOs and CFOs from an HR perspective, that you are bringing the business case, that you're using numbers. And I love surveys as an example of that. And two, just practical tips for how to keep prioritizing DEI, even if you're on a budget or you need to repurpose certain things. Any tips for the audience with regard to DEI?
Sure. One, I think embedding and not keeping it a separate island, but embedding it in everything you do in a way that's authentic and connected to your products and solutions is really important. That's number one. Because it's never going to be a big enough thing on its own. I think having this from a relevance perspective is pretty important. To finding the uh, intersection across things that really matter from an employee perspective. I'll give the example I gave with the gentleman with Part of Valor, linking in Prism, linking in Caregiver, really did cross a couple of different groups, and it's very authentic from that perspective. And it was employee driven. It wasn't, here's the HR initiative for the month. And then the last is if everything matters, nothing matters. And so don't we have a tendency to be a fast follower, and we don't jump on every cause that thinks that if it matters, it needs to matter, and not every single thing can be important. There's just not it will feel very disingenuous. And the last is that I love celebrations. I think they're fantastic and wonderful celebration, and let people celebrate what's meaningful to them, but be open to learning about all the global celebrations. We've learned so much about Diwali, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think I am. But that's just one piece from that perspective. Just as a lot of people are learning, well, what is really the Christmas celebration? What does it mean? Why is 4th of July important in the United States? Why are other things? Why is Women's History Month celebrated during different parts of the year and depending on part of the globe you're in? And just thinking that from an authentic perspective. And then, I'd say the last is that if everything matters, nothing matters. And I would just be authentic when it comes to those pieces. I hope that makes sense. And listen, it's a challenge every day. I'm learning something every single day. I will tell you that I've come full when it comes, not full circle, but when I think we rotated very aggressively to really understanding employee needs during COVID, which is great. But we've almost become afraid to say, hard work is an important part of our work environment, and showing up and being part of a team is critically important. And I think it's super okay to ask our employees and our team members to show up for each other and lean into that. And I think we got a little bit away from that because uh, and I think it's important to understand what our needs are, but you can't ever forget why you have work. And for us, we have work because our customers value our products and solutions and need them. And we need to make sure we're here to deliver those.
So well said. Truly, I think that I don't think we talk about this enough. That uh, DEI, in order for it to be effective, needs to be a company-wide initiative. It needs to be shared. HR people will make mistakes, need to learn from and lean on their employees, and vice versa. And so I think I imagine it will be quite a relief for people in the audience to hear that, yeah, we need to all come together in partnership for these initiatives to be successful. And I love your point about really pushing for employee-driven initiatives. It just, to your point, feels more impactful, more authentic, more effective. Thank you so much, Martha. This has been such
You.
a fabulous discussion. Yeah, of course. Everyone, if you all want to reach out, Martha, she's on LinkedIn. Come find her. Yep. Really excited. Thank you again for chatting with us. Very excited to keep this partnership going. Thank you again,
Sure,
Martha.
you bet. If you need any data protection services, call Commvault.
Yes, don't forget about Commvault.
Thanks, team. Appreciate it. And thanks to the Athena team. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Shout out to your women founders. Woo
Yes.
woo.